Thank you so much for coming to my presentation today. It's called Making the Case for Customer Case Studies. My name is Katie Corbett. I am a writer specializing in customer case studies and success stories. So I'm really glad you're able to be here today. I just want to extend a quick thank you to Forward Fest and to the Forward Fest sponsors. And I'll read them out because that's part of the agreement I made when I decided to present today. So some of them are Greater Madison Chamber of Commerce, M3 Insurance, Madison Gas and Electric, Nieder and Boucher, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Starting Block Madison, Swink, Urban Land Interests, Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, Whipplefee, again with the pronunciation, and Wisconsin Union. So those wonderful sponsors made this event possible. So first, I want to share a little story, and I'm going to share my screen really quickly. All right. So hopefully you guys can all see this picture. Greta, feel free to unmute yourself and let me know if you can see it. I am totally blind, so I can't see what's on the screen. Anyway, this picture should be, if it's displaying correctly, a picture of me using a solar cooker. And I got into solar cooking when I first learned about it when I was in high school. And I researched a whole bunch of different methods of solar cooking and wanted to figure out how to start solar cooking. And I looked into instructions on how to build my own, and I kind of read online of what people's experiences were. And a lot of them said things like, oh, you know, you need a bright sunny day. You can't really have any cloud cover at all. You might need to wait till it's like 86 degrees out. And here in Wisconsin, we get a few of those days, but not nearly enough to solar cook on a regular basis. So as I continued looking at customer reviews and listening to information about solar cooking, I came across this solar cooker, which is from a company called GoSun. And the reason I picked it is because the founder used it. He talked about, you know, how he was able to cook in February in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is pretty similar to Wisconsin weather, pretty cold and overcast. So, you know, and as I got more involved with the company, I saw more stories. They shared a lot more stories of customers using their solar cookers. They have a Facebook group of people talking about their experiences with the solar cookers and sharing recipes and all kinds of fun stuff. And so I knew that when I bought it, it was going to work. And that is kind of the crux of my presentation today, to share, you know, my experience with customer success stories from the perspective of a consumer, and to show you how you can create your own. So I'm going to stop screen share for just a minute, and then I'll talk for a little bit and share my screen again a little bit later in the presentation. Okay. So first of all, I'm going to pop in the chat a link to a Google Drive folder where I've included a bunch of handouts that you can use when you're creating case studies, as well as examples of case studies. And I'll do screen shares of this stuff throughout the presentation, but I want to make sure that you have this stuff at your disposal. So put it in the chat. There, that's a folder that you can look at throughout the presentation. And again, I'll be sharing my screen with examples from it. So first of all, what is a customer case study? So when a client or customer uses your products or services, they will have an experience. Hopefully it's an amazing one. And they will share that with other people through referrals, word of mouth. Maybe they'll leave you a testimonial. Maybe you'll get them to write a review for you on Google or Facebook. And these are great because they share your products and services, the impact that those have with other people who are thinking about buying from you. A customer case study is a much longer piece of content. And I'm going to open up our Google Drive folder here to share with you an example of a customer case study that I wrote. There's an example before design and after design, and I'll show you the after design one because it's a bit more, you know, pulled. It looks nice. So let me pull it up. And you can view these yourself later on. All right. So I'll just scroll down a little bit so you can see what the case study looks like. So this is very long. You can see there's quotes in here. We'll get to some bullet points in a minute. It just tells the whole entire story broken up into headings and sections. And I'll break those down in a few minutes for you too. So you can read this in your own time thoroughly and just kind of see that it really takes the person who's thinking of working with, this was written for a coach. She's amazing. She's a LinkedIn coach. Her name is Sue Gresham. And it takes people from, you know, here's what it's like to work with this person, and here's what it's like to really implement her solutions. And this client landed a dream job. It happened twice in a matter of months, a few years apart. So she landed her first dream job and then worked at that job for a while and then ended up getting laid off, you know, through no fault of her own. Companies just get restructured and things. And then she did the same thing again, landed her dream job in months just by networking on LinkedIn. She didn't apply for any jobs. She didn't fill out any of those annoying applications. And because of Sue's suggestions, that helped her do that. So that is a case study. So as you can see, it's much longer than a testimonial. It's more than just a little sound bite. It is really a way to tell the whole story of what it's like to work with you, and to it maximizes the results that you can show to your customers. So we'll close that for now. And apologies if you end up seeing my notes. All right. I'm going to stop screen share for just a second and talk a little more. All right. So, is it just me who reads customer case studies, or do more people do that? There are some statistics that show that people really love case studies and social proof, and that it really makes an impact. So there's a statistic, 92% of people look at reviews and testimonials before they make a purchase. And 88% of people trust reviews as much as or more than they trust recommendations from their friends. I mean, depending on how many, depending on who your friends are. So that is great. So, and also for case studies, they're among the top 3 pieces of content that are used to convert leads to customers. And those other 2 things, in case you're curious, are in-person events and webinars. And 73% of B2B marketers, they create case studies. So case studies are a way to promote your products and services authentically. When I talk about case studies, to people who are interested in learning more about them, I share certain examples of how my customers are using their case studies and the impact that they get from using them. So, for example, I have one customer who is using his case studies right now in venture capital pitches because he has an education tech company and he's trying to raise money for expanding that and expanding his offerings. So that's just one example that I often share of how people are using their case studies and how it's going. So now we'll go into how customer case studies are created. So there are 4 main parts to a customer case study, but before you can get into those 4 parts of a case study, it's really important to pick your ideal customer. And I created a document in our handy dandy Google Drive folder, which is in the chat box if you want to open it up yourself. And I'll open up, for anyone who doesn't feel like looking for it, I'm going to open up a document that talks about the characteristics of a customer that can be featured in a case study. It's called, "Is Your Client the Right Person to Feature in a Customer Case Study?" So let me open that up, share my screen. Glad you like the materials. It was really fun to put it together. Okay. Sharing screen. All right. All right, so here are some characteristics, questions to ask yourself to determine if the customer you're thinking about is an ideal fit for a customer case study. Because you want this customer to be a huge fan of yours. You want their stories to be really positive and really fun and really engaging. I mean, I'll tell you, when I interviewed the customer of Sue's, her name was Amy, it was just such a fun experience because she just loved Sue and loved what she did. And it is amazing to hear just the enthusiasm and the joy that can come through from a really, really happy customer. So things to think about. Overall, did things go well between you and this customer? Did you both enjoy working together? Have they exclaimed about the results they've gotten through working with you? That can be while you're working together, "Oh, wow, this is amazing. Thank you so much." Or, afterward? Did they post about it right away on their social media? Yeah, I just worked with this person. It was great. Thank you. Have they offered to refer you to anyone that they know? That's another great thing to know, because people only refer people that they like and trust. They won't just refer just anybody. And if their referrals have been good referrals, that's even better, because that shows that, you know, like attracts like. They're referring you to more of your ideal customers. Has a client chosen to work with you again? That's another really important distinction. You know, if they work with you once, give it a try, and then you never hear from them again. I mean, depending on the type of work you do, they still might be a great fit for a case study. Because if you do more one-off projects, or, you know, you help them with a situation once, that probably won't come up again. Obviously, you know, if it was a great experience, definitely get back in touch with them. But if it's a type of arrangement like a coaching arrangement or a writing arrangement, or an arrangement where you would be working with them again and they decide to work with you again, that's an indication that they really like what you did. Also, if they keep in touch with you, there are people that I have worked with in the past that I haven't had the opportunity to work with again, but I still reach out to them and keep in touch with them. And as a customer, you know, a customer of theirs, and that can be a great indicator that they like you as a person, because they want to keep in touch with you. If they have talked about any tangible results they've gotten through working with you, that is a huge indicator that they are watching what happened as a result of your work together and tracking it and really noticing a change. So that can be a great indicator that they might be a good person to feature in a case study, because in a case study, it's really important to have those results. If there were bumps in the road during your work together, were they satisfied with how you handled them? Now, that's also important, because not every interaction is going to go perfectly smoothly. You know, there might be some technology issues or some personality differences, or even just a misunderstanding of what, you know, how they thought things were going to turn out, or something like that. And if you handle that with grace and poise, they will notice that. And that can turn a customer who was kind of like on the fence, like, oh, I don't know how this went or how it's going to go, to a, wow, this is amazing. Like, this person totally solved my problem and answered my questions, and it was great. So that's another reason to maybe feature somebody. Think about what this client says about you when they introduce you to other people. That can also be a really great indicator of them being a great person to feature, because they will essentially, through the case study, they will be talking with your potential customers about you. So knowing what they say about you can be important. So yeah, answer these questions. I encourage you, you know, after we're done here today, take a few minutes and think about the people that come to mind as you're answering these questions. And then you can work to create a really great case study. So now we'll go to the next part of the case study creation process, which is the interview. And I'm going to share the examples of customer interview questions first. All right, so, all right, so here are just some examples. So I mentioned those 4 sections of a case study. So introductory questions. You'll want some questions that ask things about who your customer is. These are a little bit more written for a business who's interviewing a consumer. If you're interviewing another person who is a business that used your products and services, you might include questions like, you know, how big is your business? How many locations do you have? How many employees do you have? Stuff like that. But I thought it'd be great to include these types of questions, because then you can also interview your more, you know, your everyday consumer who may not work for a company. So first, about recording the conversation, I just want to say something really quick about that. I have interviewed a lot of people. I have over 11 or 12 years of journalistic experience. Recording is amazing. You can just hit that record button and then sit back and relax and enjoy the conversation. And when you ask your customer about recording, definitely let them know this will only be used in the case study. I've never had a customer who had a problem with it. So don't be afraid to ask, because it just makes the conversation flow a lot more smoothly, and it makes things easier for you as you're creating your case study. So we've got some of those questions. Where are you from? What do you do? How old are you? It might be relevant depending on the product you have. An example, in the case study that I shared earlier about Amy, she was an older job seeker, and that was really important because it showed that being an older job seeker did not impact her in the slightest when she used Sue's results, and that's why I asked her age. Okay, so then we'll have the challenge questions. Those questions ask about things like, what were your goals and objectives? How did you try to solve the problem previously, or how were you trying to solve it yourself? That's a really important question because it just gets at their frustration, and it can really show, like, I tried this and this and this and nothing worked. Oh, it was so frustrating. So while you might not say, like, oh yeah, they tried product from competitor X and competitor Y, like, you don't want to list the names of competitors in a case study, but it can be great just for your writing of the case study to get that tone right in that section. Another question I really love is, describe a time when you realized you needed to make a change. That can be a really great question to get them to tell a story. So then we start going into questions about, looking at other options, and that leads you to the solution questions. And you are the solution, my friends. Your products and services, this part is all about you. And it talks about, what you do, who you are, briefly in 1 or 2 paragraphs. And it also talks about why your customer chose you. So asking how they heard about you is important. Asking if they evaluated other options. Now, again, we don't want to list competitors in our case study, like name them, but knowing who they talked to and knowing how you stand out from them can be really helpful. Knowing why they specifically chose to work with you. So you might, as a company, you might have an idea of why they chose to work with you. You might think it's because you provide great printing solutions, or you provide, fast internet, or you're a writer that writes something that not many other people write, which is me. But your customer might tell you something very different. They might say, well, you were the only person who answered the phone that day. I called 6 people. You were the only person who answered the phone. And that tells you, I've got great customer service. Or, they may say, you were the only person who, gave me a quote up front, you gave me a range, and then your quote was within that range. It'll help you learn how you stand out. So definitely asking that question is really important. And then, of course, getting details about the history, when they started working with you. What about the approach convinced you that we were the right fit for you? That also can tell you information about the experience that they had. And then, so just a bunch of questions about the challenge. And then we get into the results questions. The more concrete the results are, the better the case study will be, because then you can have a headline that says, you know, job candidate, I can't remember the exact headline from Sue's case study, but you know, job candidate finds dream job in 3 months twice. Like, you can have a really impactful headline like that. So one of my favorite questions is the, can you share any anecdotes of when our work made a real difference? Because again, it gets them to tell stories about their experience. And then we go into the greatest results and find out about when did the package pay for itself, the product service package pay for itself. That's another really cool question to ask. And then, of course, getting kind of the before and after. What were your life and career like before working with us? And then the impact, what's different about them now? And then, of course, the crux of all questions, kind of why they're doing this case study. Would you recommend that others work with us, and why? And I'm sure they'll say yes, because they're being featured in a case study. Then we have some wrap-up questions. Things that I like to ask, you know, is there anything else you'd like to add? Because who knows, they might have something that they thought of down the road. Can I get in touch with you if I have any other questions? That's another great one, because then later, if you need to get more specific about results, or you want to clarify a number or something like that, you can ask them that question, because you've already opened the door saying, I might ask you another question. And then it can sometimes be really fun to get a headshot of them to feature in your case study, and other pictures too. I know that the web designer I work with, she gets pictures, before and after pictures of the websites that she designs. So now we'll go into some really quick interviewing tips, since I've been doing.
Katie, I hate to interrupt you. There
Yeah.
are some questions, or one question in the chat about the document
yeah,
you were just sharing.
Let's pause and take some questions really quick. Go ahead, Greta.
So in the chat, we have a question that says, why not include competitors? Can you use competitor 1, 2, 3, etc.?
Yeah. So your competitors might see your case studies, and also sometimes when you name drop a competitor, it can seem a little more negative, because obviously the competitor's solution didn't work out for your customer. So, I mean, you can definitely say something like if your customer says, yeah, I tried 3 different internet companies, or I tried 3 different graphic designers, you can certainly say that. But in terms of actually naming your competitors, it's generally frowned upon. So just to keep things positive, and to keep the focus on your customer and on you and the experience that you provide. Yeah, no problem. And thanks for stopping me, Greta. Do we have any other questions that have come up?
There's nothing in the chat. If anyone has any questions going forward, you can just type them in there and I will ask them for you.
Yeah. Okay. And we'll also have a few minutes at the end for questions, if you at the end. So thank you for your question. Okay. We will go into the interview tips. Second. There we go. Okay. I was having technical difficulties. Okay, here we go. So when you're creating customer case studies, having the interview be a really great experience is important for you, because it will help you be a little more relaxed, and also just for your customer, you know, it it's part of the experience that they get through working with you. So a few things that I've done that I found really helpful. When scheduling an interview, give your client a few different times that work for you, so they have some times to pick from, and that kind of eliminates the back and forth that can happen through emails. Have your list of questions prepared ahead of time. So hopefully you can download that little sheet and use it to customize your questions to your situation and your products and services. Send a list of questions to your client or customer in advance so they have time to look them over. That can be really important. And as a caveat, whenever I do this, I tell them two things. I tell them, please, no need to respond to the email. We will talk about these questions during the interview, because sometimes they want to write back. And while that can be, it can seem more efficient, people write differently than they talk. And when you're converting this into an actual story, you will want to preserve their voice as the customer who has had a really great experience. And a lot more enthusiasm can come through vocally than usually comes through in writing. The other thing I tell them is, these are some questions I might ask. And the reason I do that is because, as you saw, that list of questions is over 30 questions long. It can be a little intimidating. It's going to take you about 45 minutes to an hour to get through them all. So knowing that, here's the questions that I'll ask, that I might ask, it kind of lessens the freak out factor when they see all those questions there. You can give your client the option of answering in writing. Like I said, I don't quite recommend it, just because people talk differently than they write. When you're conducting interviews, make sure you're in a quiet place where there isn't any other noise or distractions, and record the interview to capture accuracy of quotes, and always ask permission before recording the interview. This next one is a really important one. Ask one question at a time. Combining questions can be confusing. So, it's a great idea to just, here's question one, tell me about a time when our products and services made a real difference. There, that's your question. Now, saying something like, tell me about a time when our products and services made a real difference, and what did you think about that? Like, that can be a little bit more twofold, which just gives your customer a lot more to keep in their head. And so they won't be thinking about their experience. They'll be busy trying to remember your question. If you noticed, most of the questions in the list that I provided, and most of the questions you should be asking, are open-ended questions, which basically means they are answered with more than just yes or no. This is important because it gets them to talk a little more, it gets them to share their story with you. And then, if you're requesting a recommendation on LinkedIn or a review, or even before you do the case study interview, you could send them their testimonial if they left one for you already, just to provide them, to kind of jog their memory a little bit. So yeah, those are my interview tips. Feel free to make use of those. And now we will go into all the different ways that you can use your customer case studies. This list is by no means exhaustive. There are many different ways to use case studies, and I'm having technical difficulties. 1 second. Okay. All right. So you can use case studies in print. These are just a few suggestions for each one. I'll scroll down. I won't say them all, but You can use them in your company brochure. You can use them at trade shows. You can use them in publications, in print. You can use them on posters and handouts and things like that. On social media, you can post a link to your customer case study across all your social media platforms once it's up on your website. You can take a quote from your case study along with a photo and post it on Facebook or Instagram, kind of say, thanks for working with me. This is great. I did that a few weeks ago and it got some pretty good traction. If you are on Twitter, you can just take a statistic from your case study and post it as a little tweet. That can be a fun way, to share the results that your customers get through your products in 280 characters now, 280 characters or less, or 140 characters less in a short format. You can do the same thing on LinkedIn. And then also, of course, when you're having conversations with people on social media, you can talk a little bit about your case studies. Online, post it on your website. You can create like a customer case studies page. You can put it in your e-newsletter. You can shorten it up and create a blog post with it. And you can, even use it in your prospecting emails. You'll notice that some of these tips are a little bit duplicative. The reason I did that is because when you are putting together your marketing plan and you're thinking about, okay, we want to, do a direct mailing, we want to do emails, we want to do an update on our website, we want to do social media, then you can look through this list and look right at the section that you want to look at and pick the choices that work best for you. So you can do it in newsletters. And it's also important to create separate newsletters for, one for your customers, one for your partners, one for your employees, and one for your prospects, and share your case studies in all of those different places. You can use case studies as a lead magnet to encourage newsletter signups. Then we'll move on to the in sales calls and pitches section. This one, you can leave a voicemail for your, if you make sales calls, if that's part of what you do, you can leave a little statistic in a voicemail talking about how your products and services have impacted people. And this can particularly be helpful. Again, you don't want to name competitors, but you can say something like, 60% of people in your fields have experienced greater revenue because of insert name of software here. So that can be a cool way to share your stories. And then during your calls with prospects, you can keep your case studies around in case your customers ask you, your clients ask you for return on investment and what is it like to work with you, things like that. So there's a few more different ways to promote your case studies and sales calls. So then also you can reach out to media and other publications to promote what you do using case studies. And a great way to do that is to create a searchable story bank on your website. If you're particularly a company that gets a lot of stories, maybe you encourage your customers to leave their own stories. It can be cool to have a searchable data bank for them. So yeah, those are about 30 ways to use customer case studies in your marketing. And I'm going to stop screen share. All right. So one quick note before we enter the question and answer portion. Sharing and tracking. So yes, sharing is really important. Also tracking is really important. You'll want to track the number of views you get, the number of reactions you get, what people have said after viewing your case studies. And that's a step that people forget to do. So I just wanted to remind you guys to remember to track. And it's, you know, tracking your results will help you know that your case studies are being effective and that they are doing what they're supposed to, which is sharing the success stories of how your company has been successful. So if you're looking for things to post on social media, if you're looking for things to put in your newsletter, if you're looking for ways to engage with the larger media, consider customer case studies, because those will help you promote your business through the voices of your happy customers. So we will take a couple minutes for questions. And also, if you want to think about this more, maybe you know you'll have questions in the future, but you can't, you just are still digesting all of this information. I invite you to set up a time to meet with me, and I'm going to put a link to my Calendly in the chat, and we can have a really quick 15-minute conversation about case studies or anything that you would like in regards to strategically promoting them, or if you have questions about interviewing or creating a case study, I'm happy to talk about those too. So thank you for having me here today, and I now open it up for questions. You can put them in the chat and Greta can read them out, or you feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions.
All right, so there aren't any questions yet, but it looks like everyone thought this was really great. And
Cool.
Maggie, thanks you for helping to think about different ways to use case studies.
You're welcome.
All right, so if there aren't any more questions, I can turn it back over to Katie just to wrap up a little bit, but everyone is saying thank you, excellent job. This is really helpful for everyone, I think.
Cool. Yeah,
I will be sending the recording to Katie after this is finished, and if you want to request it, I guess you can reach out to her.
Yeah, my contact information is in each one of those sheets that I shared. And if you joined from the LinkedIn event, I'll post a link to the recording in the LinkedIn event as well. So as I wrap up here, one little story. So I'm sure we've all been there. I was a few months ago. You know, you're sitting on your phone or at your computer and you know you've agreed, okay, I'm gonna make myself post on social media for me it's every Tuesday. Every day, every week, again for me, every Tuesday. What do I post? That was me until I created a LinkedIn posting ideas sheet. And it basically was a handy dandy Google Doc that had a date column, a topic column, and then even a column where I could kind of start writing the post text if I wanted to. And you could even put your tracking metrics into this document if you wanted. I just had that brainstorm now, so now I'm like, that's a great idea. I'm gonna go do that. So I sat down for about a couple hours and just hammered out a whole bunch of post ideas. And your case study can be a great place to draw for ideas of what you want to post. I also wanted to make a little PSA. I am looking for people who are interested in getting a case study, using it, and then kind of tracking their results and figuring out how that went. And then, you know, you can use it to promote you and what it was like to work with me. So if you're interested in that, also feel free to set up a meeting and we can set up a time to talk more about that. But yeah, your case study can be that treasure chest of ideas that you can use to post so that you will never have to ask yourself again, what do I post on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever social media platform you use. So we will end it early if no one else has any questions. And again, thank you so much for your time and your attention. It has been a pleasure to be here with you today. Have a great one.